Well, here we are with the Hawker Siddeley Nat T1, which was standard RAF advanced trainer from 1964 till the end of the 70s. The Nat concept actually started as a fighter project to buck the trend towards heavier and faster jet fighters to make the aircraft small, light and very manoeuvrable. In fact, the fighter version of the aircraft never, if you'll excuse the pun, took off, except in the Indian Air Force, where it proved to be a very formidable adversary for the F-86 flown by the Pakistanis. Nonetheless, the concept appeared appealing to the Royal Air Force, who commissioned a two-seat version, and this resulted in the Nat T1, an example of which I'm sitting in now. And this took pilots from the jet provost through onto the advanced training, and which led them into aircraft like the Lightning, which was in its heyday in the 60s. Not only was the Nat used for training, advanced training of pilots, but of course the world famous aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, used it as their mount up till about 1979. In fact, the first Nat aerobatic team was the Yellow Jacks, which was formed at Valley and led then by Brian Lee. And after a couple of years of display flying with the Yellow Jacks, the aircraft were then painted red, and they formed a 9-aircraft aerobatic team, which we all know is the world famous Red Arrows. The Nat is actually a very small aeroplane, very manoeuvrable. It's powered by a Bristol Siddeley Orpheus engine and is supersonic in a shallow dive. I remember from my Air Force days on my one trip of flying the Nat, the extremely high rate of roll. I flew it in the back seat at night when I was actually flying V-bombers for my day job, and I was amazed that a small touch of the ailerons could produce a 360-degree roll of the aircraft in very short order. And in fact, that very high rate of roll was artificially limited by stops in the ailerons. It was a very manoeuvrable aircraft. It had a few teething problems in the early days at Valley because of the very advanced hydraulic system and the follow-up tailplane system and the unlockable elevators, but gave excellent service both at 4 FTS at Valley and of course with the Red Arrows. It's a delight to be sitting in this aircraft today, which is preserved at Kemble, which was for many years the base of the Royal Air Force Red Arrows when they were operating the Nat. And this aircraft tomorrow is expected to lead the Red Arrows to celebrate 40 years of flying as the Reds. So it's a wonderful aeroplane. There are several still flying. We have another one parked next to us, which is out of camera at the moment, painted in yellow, which was the colour of the original Yellow Jacks up at RAF Valley, but unfortunately that has a fuel leak and won't be flying tomorrow. So we very much look forward to seeing this aircraft fly, leading the Arrows, and after the first part of the display the Nat will break off and the Red Arrows will go into their regular routine. But when the camera walks around the aeroplane, you'll see just how tiny this aeroplane is. It's a very small aeroplane indeed. You can see some of the unusual properties of the layout of the Nat. For example, if you look at the main landing gear, it's extremely narrow, but to save weight and complexity, the landing gear could be lowered to just the mid position and the nose wheel would stay retracted, and that was the air brake position of the Nat. It has no other air brakes. Very clever idea if you think about it. But on the other hand, the very narrow track of the Nat could make the aircraft quite a handful in a crosswind, particularly on a wet runway. And for the instructor sitting in the back seat, the visibility was less than you'd get from a Hawk. If you look at the back seat, you will see the blast screen in case the canopy has to be jettisoned to protect the instructor, but he's sitting quite low, so the visibility or the view from the back for the instructor was quite poor. Compare that with the Hawk, which we'll be seeing later, and you will see that the instructor is actually sitting quite high and he can look over the top of the student's head, which makes it a much easier aeroplane on which to instruct. But nonetheless, this aircraft served the Royal Air Force extremely well. It's trained a lot of pilots who went on to high-performance aircraft such as the Lightning and the Harrier. And it's a delight to see it here today. And what's more, tomorrow we'll see it leading the Red Arrows, just as it used to fly with the Arrows in the 1970s. Great aeroplane. Well, here we have the Red Arrows taxiing out now. Spike Jepson is the leader, taxiing out as Red 1, and he's followed by 8 other aircraft. There are 10 on the line today. The spare aircraft is ready and waiting just in case one aircraft should become unserviceable. But we have a special treat today to mark 40 years of the Red Arrows, and as a tribute to the Nat, which was the first of the Red Arrows aircraft, we have a privately owned Nat taxiing out with the formation today, and he's going to join them for the first part of the formation, and then after he'll break away while the Reds do their show. Hawker Siddeley Nat T1 of the Central Flying School, or the Red Arrows, uses the standard advanced trainer for the Royal Air Force and is in service with many other air forces around the world, including the United States Navy, which operates the aircraft. It's a T-45, the Goshawk. And it looks like the Red 8 has got a passenger on board too. I bet he's going to have some fun. And there we see the Nat taxiing. That aircraft served at the Fort Flying Training School at RAF Valley, which was the originator of the Red Arrows. Their aerobatic team flying the Nat was called the Yellow Jacks, and they were so good that a couple of years of operation of the Yellow Jacks led to the formation of the Red Arrows. Okay, all 9 arrows are lined up with the Hawk behind it, running up to full power on the brakes, and the leader any moment now will call rolling, rolling, go. The first pair will release their brakes and they will be off, followed at about 2-second intervals by the 4 subsequent pairs. In fact, they're taking off as 3s. Here they go. First 3 aircraft are just lifting, followed by the second pair, followed by a 4th ship. Any moment now we'll see the tiny little Nat in hot pursuit, but she's every bit as fast as the Hawk. She'll have no trouble catching them. Here we have quite a spectacular scene. It's the Red Arrows followed by 1 Nat, so we have 10 aircraft in the formation now. Spectacular sight. Beautiful echelon of the Red Arrows with the Nat tucked in the box behind. Absolutely perfect formation. This is why the Red Arrows are generally considered the world's best formation aerobatic team. Here's the Nat running in for his display. Bristol Siddeley Orpheus giving it lots of push, and is using the smoke to very good effect. Coming around about 400 knots, 150 feet. Hard turn, about 80 degrees of bank on there, so we'll be pulling 5 to 6 Gs. Speeds around 250, 300 knots. Beautiful head-on shot of this diminutive aeroplane. You don't get in it, you put it on.
Tomorrow, when she will be 41. She was issued to number 4 Flying Training School at RAF.
Beautiful inverted flight, a gentle push on the stick. Again, about 300 knots. Engine throttle back to conserve fuel when inverted, because the recuperator has a limited period of time of giving fuel to the engine. Smoke looks quite spectacular in an aerobatic team, but it has a dual purpose. A, the spectacle of seeing the smoke, but it's also very useful during the formation to assist another aircraft in spotting where the leader is when they're joining up. If they've broken formation, a little squirt of smoke from the leader or the rest of the team, and they can soon slot back into position.
The fantastic success that Hawk has had on the export market.
Beautiful shot. Waggle the wings to say goodbye, and that, I think, is the end of the display. He'll be braking into the circuit now, reducing speed, getting the gear down, the flaps out, before landing on this rather damp Kemble runway. Coming around the corner at about 130, 140 knots.
So giving him the feeling of what it's like to fly a single-seat fast-jet aircraft.
Once lined up with the runway, full flap, and bringing the speed back to about 120 knots.
That is the Tucano, and the Tucano will be flying later on today. Martin Day will be displaying that.
Typical fighter approach, bank on almost all the way down towards the runway, running the wings level now, only at about 100 feet. Over the threshold now, you'll hear perhaps the squeal from the tyres as he touches down. And here she comes over the hill. There she is, the Nat T1. 41 years old tomorrow, this aircraft. Well, here they come. The Red Arrows are running in across the Kemble hangars. They've started off with a barrel roll with red and white smoke. It's going to be a difficult day because of the weather. It's constantly, because of the quite brisk wind, the cloud formation over the airfield is constantly changing, and the 15 minutes or so of their display, you will see quite a big change. So there they are, running in across the field. Beautiful formation. Notice how the echelon aircraft are exactly in line. The two aircraft in the box are right on the center line of the aircraft ahead of them. Changing into an arrow formation. I think it's fair to say that one of the most distinguishing features of the excellence of the Red Arrows is the rapidity and apparent ease with which they change formation. That is one of the most difficult things to do. Actually holding station when the formation is constant is not, so this is all relative, but not that difficult. But changing formation is very hard work. To do it quickly and smoothly and accurately is a mark of a really good aerobatic team. And that doesn't come any better. Heading towards the rain now. Decisions for the leader. See, they're almost disappearing from view. No doubt in a couple of minutes' time that spell of rain will have gone through and it'll have moved somewhere else. The mantle of being the symbol of excellence of aviation in the United Kingdom now is fairly and squarely on the shoulders of the Red Arrows since the retirement of Concord. And as a tribute to Concord, here are the Reds coming through in Concord Formation. There's that very quick formation change I mentioned earlier. There they are back in a diamond formation, beautifully done and symmetrical too. Those on the right and the left of the formation were changing at the same rate. They have a very symmetrical and very polished performance. Smoke on go. Vigan formation. And it looks like the weather is going to hold us to a flat display today. Well, not totally flat. We're going to get some rolling today, and here is one of the rolling maneuvers. They're pulling up now into a bow roll, pulling about 2 Gs during that bow roll. Power being eased back just a little as the nose drops below the horizon. And the power going back on again as the aircraft recovers towards level flight. Well, there we are. A couple of minutes ago I said they were disappearing from view in rain. Where that rain was, it's beginning to clear. It's almost a blue sky developing in that area.
Coming. Left. Now.
Beautiful display with coloured smoke again. Beautiful, perfect formation. Pulling about 3G in that turn with about 75 degrees of bank. You can see how much the rain is making the visibility very much reduced now. We can just about see the Hawks even though they've got their landing light on. There they are in a Diamond 9 formation now. Looks like they're going to roll from this into a bit of a clear bit of sky. With me now is Squadron Leader Carl Jepson, Spike Jepson, who was Red 1, leader of the world famous Red Arrows, the most enviable position. Carl, many years ago I used to teach formation flying in the Royal Air Force, and I watched your displays with a very critical eye. May I congratulate you on a wonderful performance. It was sharp, it was crisp, the formation changing was particularly good, I thought. It was very quick and your wingmen were very symmetrical. It was a performance by the Arrows as good as I've ever seen. But I can't think that the weather was any help to you. How did you cope with today's dynamic and changing weather?
Well, we planned it very carefully before we went. We knew the weather was going to be changeable, so we took the precaution of briefing a flat stroke rolling show, and we talked about any options that we may have to go full during that period. But the Red Arrows, I think, have notoriously been flexible enough to interchange their displays, and we write our displays cleverly enough to be able to fit them like templates on top of one another, and it's very quick and easy to change from one show to the other with no loss of time or positioning. And we work very hard on that in training to make sure it's seamless.
Well, it certainly showed it was absolutely superb. It's particularly nice to see the Arrows back at Kemble in their 40th anniversary. The Red Arrows really had their predecessor as the Yellow Jacks at Valley at 4 FTS, and then they became the Arrows, and I think it was 1966 when they formally became the Red Arrows. So your heritage goes back 40 years. But I believe you've been re-establishing a bond with former members of the Red Arrows. The public called them the Arrows, but I think in the firm they're called the Reds, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Would you like to tell us how you've rekindled the bond with former members of the team?
Yes, well, we thought this year, it's a significant anniversary for us this year, our 40th season, and we thought it was important to get the previous team members, the pilots and the ground crew back involved with what we do. The first thing we did was to try and get in touch with them all, so we did that via the website, via various means, the Royal Air Force News, Friends Reunited and so on. On the website, we introduce pictures from all of the diaries. We keep a diary each year, and for every year we put several photographs from each year to make sure the guys felt like they belonged to the team. I wrote to a couple of the guys who were in the 1965 team and asked them what formation shapes they flew in 1965. And we tried to recreate a couple of those formation shapes in our show this year. And equally, we have got a Nat that is doing the circuit with us this year, and we're doing a few flypast and arrivals, which we think is absolutely tremendous. tremendous, and it really is a lump in the throat moment for the guys who have been involved with the team in the Nat era. And lastly, of course, we've had a Squadron Reunion, the first full Squadron Reunion with aircrew and ground crew, and then we held a landmark event to launch the 40th season, which involved the 1965 team, ex-team leaders and ourselves, and some very senior figures from the aerospace industry. So the whole ream of events that they've been invited to, and we hope this rekindles their interest. We think they've got a lot to offer.
I think it's a splendid thing to do, Spike. And talking of lumps in the throat, I didn't actually see it, but my wife and daughter actually saw you tucked up behind the Concorde with Mike Bannister flying it down the mile.
Yeah.
What was that really like to be in the Reds behind
Well,
Queen of the Skies?
Yeah, well, you can imagine that for us, technically, it wasn't demanding.
Sure.
But such an iconic aeroplane, you know, that is boyhood dream stuff for us. The hairs were up on the back of our neck. It was an absolutely awesome experience. We loved every second of it. And we were lucky to be able to both fly on Concorde and do various shapes behind it, but also for Concorde to formate on us. And we got some wonderful images of that. For me, in my 3 years as team leader, that will be the single thing I'll take away, I think, as the overriding memory.
And very rightly so, because it was spectacular to see it on television around the world. But my wife and daughter literally had a lump in their throat and tears running down their faces when they saw it. And talking of Concorde, sadly Concorde is no longer an airworthy aeroplane, and the mantle of presenting British aviation excellence has fallen on this team and you personally. How are you going to present, or are you presenting the Red Arrows overseas this year?
Well, we are. I mean, the mantle of presenting excellence, I think, has gone with the Red Arrows right from the outset. The one thing that struck me when I took over as team leader was that the people who started the team had the vision and had the strength of character to set up right from the outset their aims, and their aims were to create a culture of excellence. And all we're trying to do is reproduce that and take it forward stage by stage. But the guys who started the team really set that up for us, and so it's tremendous to be able to follow in their footsteps. This year, you'll note we've got Concord Formation in the show, and that is a reference to the fact that Concorde is no longer with us. We feel that loss, I think, as greatly as any members of the public, but we look forward to continuing to represent the Royal Air Force, the United Kingdom, both at home and abroad. And our programme each year consists of most of our shows in the UK, but we've visited over 52 countries in the last 40 seasons that the Red Arrows have been displaying. And the Red Arrows brand, if you like, the trademark, is known right throughout the world. And we've got a huge mantle, but we enjoy that, and we enjoy the pressure, and we enjoy the accolade, and we enjoy the whole experience of representing the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom. It's a tremendous privilege.
And you do it so well. And what's the future got in hold for you, Spike? Are you going back to operational flying now?
No, my next job is going to be a ground tour. I've been lucky enough to spend the last 20 years in flying tours, and somebody has seen fit to send me off to do a ground tour. So I think it's about time.
All good things must come to an end.
Indeed.
But once again, Spike, congratulations. It was a superb display in difficult conditions, and I can see you're every bit as good as any former group of Red Arrows that I've ever seen. It was great. Thank you very much indeed.